All right, next question from Malevolent Raven. Do you view Christmas as a Christian tradition that many people take part in, or do you think that it's now separate from Christianity?
I,
Ooh.
growing up, I never viewed it as a Christian tradition
Mm-hmm.
because I was raised in a non-religious household. And I think I've mentioned this before. And part of the reason why there is no H in my name, Christine,
Mm-hmm.
is because I guess my parents really liked the name Christine, but they didn't want to name me after the literal daughter of Christ. Christine
Sure,
is
yeah.
is the daughter of Christ, I guess, in according to Christianity. So they just took the H out, and their problem solved.
Yeah, well, actually, my answer is kind of different. First of all, to answer the question more directly, I think it's pretty obvious a lot of people celebrate Christmas with no sort of religious connotation, and that seems to upset some people who very much want it to just be a Christian holiday or event. I would say though that like the celebration of the winter solstice is something that predates Christianity. So in a way, Christians just sort of co-opted this time of year as a celebration of the birth of their Savior, even though celebrations of the winter solstice around this time of year and putting up a Christmas tree and things like that aren't just specific to Christianity, right?
Right.
And I'm for the separation of church and state and yada, yada, yada. War on Christmas stuff is kind of goofy to me. I did grow up in a religious household, though. My mom grew up in a very religious household, so she made us go to church growing up, and not just on the major holidays. Like I would go to church, I think, I don't want to say every weekend because like I don't think anyone really does that, but we went to church a lot, and I think it was only when we became teenagers that my parents sort of gave us the choice of whether we wanted to continue going and being religious as our own people.
So you didn't have a choice when you were a kid?
Well, I mean, you don't really have a choice of much when you're a kid, right? And that's always a tricky debate when it comes to religion because you can say parents are like indoctrinating their kids into something, and I kind of agree with that to some
What did you
degree.
actually do when you went to church as a kid? Like, what do you remember was part of it?
I just remember being really bored more than
Or-
anything. You're
But
like,
was it like Christmas specific prayers or?
so you'd go to like a Sunday service and people would sing songs and hymns, and you'd eat crackers and pretend it's a dead guy.
Okay.
I'm being a little flippant about this, but like if you just take a step
Yeah.
back and objectively evaluate what's going on, it is a little goofy. But yeah, I'll say this: like I used to be super judgmental, and like some of my earliest memories of watching YouTube videos was watching like atheist YouTube content and
Really?
like highlights of Christopher Hitchens and people like that. And it was sort of a way for me sort of rebelling against that history, right? And I still very much believe and agree with those sort of atheist arguments in a lot of ways. But at the same time, if someone gets something from religion, and especially like a sense of community, like our culture now is one in which people barely know their neighbors a lot of the time. There's very little sense of community. And the one positive thing I will say about church or going to church is you can get a real sense of community with your neighbors and the people who live around you that way. And that's sort of absent from a more atheistic or secular society. Although you could argue that you just develop a community with like minded people around interests you may have in common with other people rather than going to church, right? But so we stopped going to church when I was a teenager. And that was partly, I wonder if maybe I don't want to get this heavy, but one of the reasons is I think my mom herself was having sort of questions about her faith because she learned that in the town she grew up in, one of the priests was assaulting a lot of the boys she grew up with. And I think that would cause anyone to sort of evaluate whether or not they want to support the institutions that defended and covered that up, right? And I think any religious people need to sort of grapple with that fact. Anyway, that got heavier than I probably wanted to. Anyway, I'm not a religious person, but I did sort of grow up in that religious context. So there was, going to Christmas mass
So it's
on Christmas
interesting
Eve.
your comment about it serving as a sense of community for people. Because I've heard that too. Well, like religion is great because people have communities they can go join a part of, as if to suggest that people who don't practice that like don't have any friends or social groups.
Yeah.
So I grew up not religious at all. My parents, I guess, when they grew up, were assigned a religion. Like their parents kind of suggested, oh, like my mother's side was Anglican but not practicing, and my father's side was Jewish but not practicing. Gotcha. So when they grew up, I guess they were part of the first generation to abandon those ideas, which was weird at their age when they were in their 20s or 30s or whatever, right? They were kind of an outlier to do that and then choose to raise their kids without any religion at all. So I had zero idea. Like, I have no idea what Christmas Mass is. I hear about it. Like, I know that it's a thing and people do it, and there are people in my school who would do that as well. But I still had so many friends who didn't partake in any religion either, and we still celebrated Christmas, and there was tons of, you know, friend groups, and nothing was really that big of a deal made out of it, or it wasn't that heavily attached to religion. Like, I have no memory. That's why I find it hard to, like, imagine, well, what did you actually do in church? Like, I've never gone to church or synagogue unless it was a funeral, a wedding, or someone's, like, bat mitzvah or communion, or basically an event that was for someone else.
Gotcha.
Like, I've never gone to a religious event for any reason because of my family, like, to go for a holiday or to, I don't know. Like, I'm blanking because I'm like, why else do people go to church? It's very weird to me. But I also didn't grow up thinking that it was weird to be religious either. Like, I guess my parents taught me, like, people can be whatever they want, and you can do whatever you want too. I was never told, like, you need to not believe in religion. Like, I could do whatever I wanted. They just didn't have any particular religion that they wanted to raise me in.
And I think that's a super healthy attitude to have about it. And if someone comes to accept a religion into their life at a later age, and not just because their parents sort of arbitrarily said this is the religion you should subscribe to, I can have a lot of respect for that. At the end of the day, like, yeah, maybe I was a kind of angsty teen young adult who, like, was really into these sort of, like, atheistic arguments and movements. And I think I've sort of softened my position these days to just, like, if people can believe whatever they want as long as they don't force those views on others. I guess the scary thing is that there's a long history of like barbarism and intolerance from very religious people that I think we have to be mindful of. And it's important to be able to critique a religion. Like when we were growing up, the idea of, like, talking about religion openly at the dinner table was kind of seen as, like, taboo. Like, oh, don't bring up politics or religion at the dinner table if you were having a dinner party, right? I think things have changed pretty significantly, and I think it's important that we are able to criticize things, and things aren't off limits in that way. But generally, just being a decent person and accepting and respectful of other people's beliefs is kind of where I land now, as long as you're not being tolerant of other people's intolerance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think some followers over the years have asked me, like, are you religious? Because they almost hope that I am of their religion, I think, is usually where it's coming from. And so I felt weird, although I have admitted like as if it's bad. But again, like, that's just the social norms being, like, kind of pushed upon me that I feel. I have said before that, yeah, I'm not religious. And I get mixed reactions to that. I get people being like, oh, yeah, makes sense. You're a data analyst. You live in Canada. People care less there or whatever. But then I also see other people almost, like, hurt or disappointed that I'm not of their religion. And I'm always so confused because I'm never disappointed when I find out that, or learn that someone is of any particular religion. I'm like, you do whatever, you know, makes you happy, what you like to do, and maybe that you were raised in.
Yeah, and you can be an example to people, that you can be a moral, decent person.
I don't know, am I going to hell? I've been told I'm going to hell, though, Ben. I need Jesus to save me. I've seen that in my comments.
Oh, just Jesus specifically?
Just Jesus.
It's not one of the other 1,000
so
gods in Judaism?
So that's our history. Neither of us at this today are religious, right? So we do not celebrate Christmas as a part of a religious activity.
No. Yeah. Good buttoning that one up.